In the late 1960s, Boeing was spending money faster than some nations could count it. A giant aircraft was rising inside a factory so vast that clouds could seem to form beneath its roof, and if the machine failed, the company that built it might not survive the landing. The aircraft was the 747. The wager behind it was close to $1 billion, a staggering sum for Boeing at the time. It was not a safe expansion of an existing product. It was a leap into a market that did not yet exist, built around a plane so large that airports had to rethink gates, baggage systems, runways, and the very rhythm of boarding. I am Walt, and this story begins in the wet industrial light of Seattle, with engineers bent over drawing boards, sparks falling through the dark, and one question hanging above everything. Would the world truly need an aircraft this enormous? Or was Boeing building the most expensive monument to corporate overconfidence in aviation history? The idea came from pressure on two fronts. Air travel was expanding rapidly, and airlines feared that airports would choke under the weight of passenger growth. Pan American World Airways wanted something bigger, an aircraft capable of carrying far more people across long distances at lower cost per seat. Its powerful chairman, Juan Trippe, pushed Boeing toward a jet roughly twice the size of the 707. Boeing had also spent years thinking about giant aircraft through a military competition for a heavy transport plane. It lost that contract to Lockheed and the C-5 Galaxy, but the work left behind engineers, ideas, and an appetite for scale. The military defeat had not killed the concept, it had merely driven it into a new market. Pan Am then placed a launch order for 25 747s, worth more than $500 million. The order was enormous, but it was not enough to make the project safe. Boeing still had to design the aircraft, create new manufacturing methods, build a factory large enough to assemble it, manage new engines, satisfy regulators, and deliver on a schedule that left little room for hesitation. The factory came first because there was nowhere existing that could hold the plane. Boeing selected a site at Everett, north of Seattle, and began carving an industrial fortress out of forest and mud. Rain soaked the ground. Earth movers worked through the gray. Steel frames climbed into the sky while the aircraft itself was still being designed. That detail captures the entire gamble. Boeing was building the plane and the place to build the plane at the same time. Joe Sutter led the engineering team that became known as the Incredibles. The name sounds triumphant now, polished by decades of hindsight. At the time, they were men trying to solve hundreds of problems before the money ran out. Weight, wing loading, landing gear, evacuation rules, cargo access, structural fatigue, cabin layout. Every answer created another question, and every delay had a financial shadow. The aircraft's shape carried its own hidden logic. Boeing did not know whether the future belonged entirely to passenger travel. Supersonic aircraft were still treated seriously, and some executives believed the 747 might eventually be displaced from premium passenger routes. So the jumbo was designed with cargo conversion in mind. The cockpit moved above the main deck, creating the famous hump and leaving the nose free for a large cargo door. Even its most recognizable feature was a hedge against being wrong. Then came the engines. The 747 needed high bypass turbofans, powerful enough to lift its immense weight while delivering the fuel efficiency airlines expected. Pratt & Whitney's JT9D was revolutionary, but revolutionary machinery rarely arrives without trouble. During testing, engines suffered from serious reliability and deformation problems. A plane could be assembled, painted, and almost ready, then sit on the ground waiting for engines that were not, Outside the hangars, the financial pressure thickened. Boeing had borrowed heavily, costs climbed, schedules tightened. Executives watched cash leave in waves, while the first aircraft still had not earned a dollar. Suppliers had to be paid, workers had to be paid. The Everett complex swallowed capital under blue industrial light, night after night. Inside, the 747 looked less like a product than a city under construction. Miles of wiring disappeared behind unfinished walls. Workers climbed scaffolds around a fuselage wider than anything commercial aviation had seen. Tools rang against metal, welding sparks fell. The nose section stood high above the floor, like the bow of a ship, built for a sea that had not yet formed. On September 30th, 1968, the first completed 747 rolled out before the public. The moment was staged as triumph, and visually it was magnificent. Airline representatives gathered, the aircraft towered above them. But a rollout is not a flight, and beauty on wet tarmac does not repay debt. The first flight came in February 1969. The jumbo left the runway and rose into the Washington sky, proving that the shape could fly. Yet flight testing remained intense. Structural questions, engine trouble, performance targets, and certification demands kept the project under pressure. Each successful test closed one danger while exposing another. Boeing was not merely racing physics, it was racing the calendar. Pan Am planned to begin service in early 1970. Missing that moment would damage confidence across the airline market. The 747 was already being sold as the future, and the future has a cruel habit of looking fraudulent when it arrives late. The aircraft entered commercial service with Pan Am in January 1970. Passengers stepped into a cabin that felt unlike anything before it. 2 aisles, a broad body, space that seemed almost theatrical. The upper deck suggested a private room above the crowd. The scale changed the emotional meaning of flying. The jet age had become mass travel. But commercial service did not bring instant peace. The American economy weakened. Airlines struggled with excess capacity. Orders slowed. Boeing faced pressure from the 747, the troubled supersonic transport program, and the decline of other aerospace work. Employment collapsed across the company and the Seattle region. Tens of thousands of Boeing jobs disappeared from their peak. A famous billboard near the airport asked the last person leaving Seattle to turn out the lights. The line was a joke only in the way gallows humor is a joke. For a moment, the giant aircraft looked almost too large for the market that had summoned it. Airlines had bought capacity ahead of demand. Rows of seats represented revenue only when filled. An empty jumbo did not look majestic. It looked like debt with wings. Boeing had crossed the most dangerous stretch of the wager. The aircraft worked, but survival still depended on the world growing into it. Over time it did. International travel expanded, airports adapted. Freight operators discovered the value of the 747's enormous volume and nose-loading capability. New versions improved range, engines, capacity, and economics. The aircraft became an icon, not because the risk disappeared, but because Boeing remained alive long enough for the risk to mature into infrastructure. The financial machinery behind the gamble was unforgiving. Boeing committed immense capital years before meaningful revenue could arrive. The factory, engineering labor, tooling, supplier network, and testing program all had to be financed in advance. Customer deposits and launch orders helped, but they did not erase the valley between spending and return. That valley is where grand industrial dreams usually die. A software company can alter a product after launch. A small manufacturer can slow production. Boeing had steel in the ground, aircraft on the line, engines delayed, airlines waiting, and lenders watching. Scale had removed the option to retreat quietly. Once Everett existed and the first jumbo took shape, reversal would not look like caution. It would look like collapse. The 747 eventually gave Boeing global prestige, technical authority, and decades of commercial value. It made long-distance mass travel more practical and became one of the most recognizable machines ever built. Yet the legend can hide how narrow the passage was. Conviction alone did not save the project. Engineering alone did not save it. Pan Am's order alone did not save it. Survival required all of them to remain aligned long enough for demand to catch up. Customer belief, borrowed capital, factory discipline, supplier endurance, regulatory approval, and a workforce willing to solve problems under extraordinary pressure. Scale creates empires only after it creates vulnerability. The unfinished jumbo beneath the Everett lights was not powerful because it was large. It was dangerous because its size forced everyone around it to keep believing. Boeing had built a machine too expensive to abandon, too visible to hide, and too ambitious to survive halfway. That was the real wager, not whether the 747 could fly, but whether conviction could remain solvent until the world was ready to board. Thank you for watching. If this story gave you a sharper view of industrial risk, financing, and corporate survival, like the video and subscribe to Ink Gold for more high-stakes business and financial documentaries. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you in the next video. Before you go, was Boeing's 747 gamble an act of strategic brilliance, or a near-fatal risk that history happened to reward?